All right, what is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to the KC Sports Report. Michael Darcy, your host here as always, and today I have the pleasure to be joined by my friend Blake Schneiders, and we're going to break down everything that's going on with this Eric Bieniemy rumor and just kind of talk about everything in general. So, Blake, it's been a crazy 24 hours. We've seen a lot of things happen, specifically with the rumors swirling around Eric Bieniemy. So, what are your initial thoughts on that, and how you doing today?
First off, always a pleasure to be joining you, Michael.
Love to have you on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I might be either in the minority, the majority, or somewhere in between. I really don't know. Obviously, this explosion on Chiefs Twitter after this article came out about the rift or supposed rift between Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes is essentially burning Chiefs Kingdom on Twitter to the ground.
Oh, yeah. It's on fire.
The people are losing their minds. And the first day that I heard anything about it, I didn't even read the article. I took a look at the first couple paragraphs and I was like, whatever. Because when I first started reading it, I looked at the and forgive me, who put out the article again?
So it was a collection of guys. They have the Twitter page, which is @1_Chiefs Kingdom. They are apparently they're formerly known as Save Our Chiefs on Twitter. They talk Chiefs football, and their account says it's run by 5 dudes. And like you just said, I could not find the article. It took me time to find the article because it really wasn't big up until Chiefs Kingdom kind of made it big.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first I heard of it when somebody else had put it out. Actually, I believe I heard it from KU commentator and Twitter legend Braden Turner, E-Turn, over there on the Twitter sphere. To me, when I first read the first couple paragraphs, the reason I stopped reading was because they were making claims, but they weren't discussed. They didn't bring any sources to the table. Now, in their defense, they claimed that they've been covering the Chiefs or working with somebody who's been covering the Chiefs since 1997, and they have valid sources. Well, that's all fine and dandy. Well, who are your sources? And if you leave them unnamed, it's a little odd because I say that, and then I will tell another
I was
story.
going to say, we got to tell that. Okay, really quickly, I want to preface this whole thing. I talked with Blake at 2 o'clock in the morning about everything about this because it's just okay, was this true? Was it conspiracy theory? But I think with a story this big, you got to name your sources because this story could genuinely change whether he comes back to the Chiefs, whether he gets sent away from the Chiefs. I mean, there's just so much that goes into this. And for you to not name your sources, I know you're probably trying to protect them, but with a story this big, you really can't afford to do that.
Yes, with a story that's encompassing one, so, and this is gonna maybe I'm almost going back on what I just said for a second, but I do know for a fact of one particular instance. That is it. I do know that Eric Bieniemy did go off or blow up or however you want to describe it on Patrick Mahomes pertaining to the last play of the half of the AFC Championship game. That did happen.
I heard that he lost his mind on Patrick Mahomes.
And again, I do know that this happened.
Yeah.
Anything outside of that, I cannot confirm anything at all. And none of these guys who wrote a story that was 10 times more scathing or, they claimed it wasn't a hit piece. I don't think that they were really trying to make it a hit piece. If they do have sources that can back up these claims, then they were just telling the news like it is, telling the Chiefs Kingdom something that maybe a lot of people didn't really know about.
Yeah.
Underlying issues within the clubhouse or within the, I guess they don't call it a clubhouse.
They call it a locker room, Blake.
It's the locker room. I mean, shit, they're all locker rooms, but whatever.
Yeah.
So it's just odd the way that this thing took over, but I didn't see them have any sources.
That's the biggest problem.
That's just if I heard
if they had sources, it'd be different.
That's just like if I heard a news story on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or anything like that, and they go, an anonymous source has told us that there has been talks of an event that might happen. It's like, that sounds like a giant fake nothing burger. Like, what are you told? What?
It sounds
That's
like
not even
4
a
guys
story.
in the back of the CNN boardroom were just like, oh, shit, we need something to say. And they came up with that. Like,
Yeah, and then they said an anonymous source.
And here's the
Okay,
thing. This Eric
anonymous source was Gary at the water cooler, is what you're saying. Like, what does that mean?
That's the problem. Like, the sources need to be named. And honestly, after reading that story, I wanted to believe it was not true. Like, so much of me was just like, oh, this is just complete BS or bull jive, as Shannon Sharp would say. But I think that it would be kind of ignorant to say that not at least some part of that was true. It might not all be true, but we know that one of those things happened from an anonymous source, but he works closely with the team. I know that for a fact. I wouldn't just spew this nothing if it wasn't true.
See, and this is where we get in trouble, Mike, because we did just rip on them for not doing
very
their
true.
source.
But I've been doing.
They also said multiple different things. Me and you know of one particular incident.
We do.
That we do know that happened from somebody that we both know. That is it. Any of those other things we cannot corroborate at all.
Here's the thing, though, and I agree 100%.
And so that's why I think it's an issue. Is like, if I can say just one thing happened, and I might not name the source for the one thing, but I do know that one thing happened, and then they're saying 20 different things happened, but didn't name a source for any of it. I'm like, okay, that is such a stretch. I don't know what is and isn't true.
But the thing is there's got to be some of the stuff that's true, because we can confirm one of those incidents, and it was Eric Bieniemy losing his mind at Patrick Mahomes at the half. But if that's true, it might not be true that Kafka is the offensive mastermind behind everything. But
where does that come from? I've never even heard. I mean, not taking credit away from Mike Kafka, but if you're going to take that much credit away from Eric Bieniemy as well, I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah, that's a damning
pretty
statement.
Large accusation.
It's a damning statement, because if Kafka was the guy behind all of it, then Eric Bieniemy shouldn't have got a job, and that's kind of where I've been this whole time. That if Eric Bieniemy is guilty of doing the things that he said, which I want to talk about one of them, because I read this clip or excerpt from the article, and I threw my phone and screamed because it pissed me off. But if this stuff is true about Eric Bieniemy, he should not coach again, and it shouldn't even be close. He might get a coordinator job somewhere else, but he should not be in Kansas City, and I think he probably kissed his head coaching job goodbye. Like, I don't think that he would get it. But let me read this really quickly. So Bieniemy called the entire second half, calling multiple times for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to get the ball instead of Jarrett McKinnon. Bieniemy called for Demarcus Robinson to get the ball in overtime, and Mecole Hardman. And that, to me, talk about self-sabotage. Like, I can't even believe that. And then at the end of regulation, with the Chiefs needing a touchdown, Bieniemy called 2 plays that the team hadn't practiced in 3 months. It led to confusion across the board, from line blocking assignments to routes to Mahomes looking shaken. Now, again, we can't prove any of this, but I think that what makes me really kind of, sit up and look at this story differently is Sam Madison, our DB's coach, apparently was not really getting along with our DBs in the beginning of the season, and he just took a job with the Miami Dolphins a couple days ago. Like, as soon as this article got published, he took a job elsewhere. It's just like, when you look at it, we are almost putting together a puzzle, and we've been getting these pieces for months. And it was almost like this article gave us a big chunk of the puzzle. And I don't know what you think about it. I think that a lot of it's probably not true, but I think there is some truth to it. I think that, he has been calling the plays, and all along we're like, Andy, this play calling sucks. It was Bieniemy the whole time.
Yeah, with the Sam Madison thing, it is the off season. Immediately, if you're going to get positions other places, coaches are going to start interviewing. So I can't say that Sam Madison had anything to do with the story dropping, that he took the job. To me, that just seems like proper timing for a coach to leave a team to go with the next team, and it was coincidentally at the same time this article came out. So I can't really put a whole lot on the Sam Madison thing.
That's true.
The fact that the Eric Bieniemy story is that he's been calling the plays. Well, we've always he's the OC.
But we knew that Andy wasn't just letting Eric call the plays, though. That was my thing. Like, okay, Eric Bieniemy is the OC, but we all know this is Andy Reid's offense. He designs the plays, and I think that in big-time situations, he took over. And that might have pissed off Bieniemy.
And it very well could have. Andy is – see, and this is kind of goes back to, this whole time we thought it was Andy Reid calling the plays majority of the time, and that's why we always made the old adage that, Andy chokes in big games and doesn't have great play calling down the stretch when the spotlight is on him. But this is claiming that it's Bieniemy who is doing it, and so therefore, if you're looking back, and how much power has Bieniemy had? How much play calling has he actually been doing where he's like, Andy, I've got this. Sit down and not sit down and shut up, but essentially, let me have this. I've got this. And so now we have to kind of shift the focus of, okay, are we blaming Andy Reid for the bad play calling sometimes, or now do we blame Eric Bieniemy for the bad play calling? It's just it's bad because we're doing this episode, and really this article did nothing but raise questions with absolutely no answers.
It really did. And if it means anything, this article is no longer published. It got taken down. I think that someone probably in the Chiefs organization is like, hey, if you don't take that down, we're going to sue you for everything that you're worth just because it's slander, because they can't prove any of this stuff most likely. But we know for a fact from our sources, which again, I know it's going to be like, oh, Michael doesn't even name his sources. Yeah, but you guys know that I've been doing this long enough that when I say something and I have reason to believe it and I have somebody who's telling me this, it's true. We know that Patrick Mahomes got chewed out by Eric Bieniemy probably too much at halftime, and didn't he have to get separated from Bieniemy, and Kafka even stepped up and was like, hey, stop it,
nope.
Eric.
See, don't know anything about that.
Okay.
I cannot confirm that. All I know is there was a disagreement and an argument between Patrick and Bieniemy. That is as far as the information that I have received goes at all. And I'm never going to try to discredit another journalist just based on anything else, but I will say I don't know these guys. I don't know these gentlemen.
I don't either. I never heard about them.
I had never really heard about them. That does not mean they don't do good work. I'm not discrediting anything that they've put out. It's just I feel like I've got you and I have a pretty good pulse on the beat of Kansas City.
Shout out Lucas.
Shout out Lucas Murphy. But literally the beat of kind of writers for Kansas City, people over at The Athletic, you, me, other guys, Lucas, like different guys who commentate and report on the Chiefs. And there's so much speculation to me in that article without naming sources. I just don't know what to believe. But they've painted a very good picture of essentially what – so I was listening to Briscoe when the story dropped. Briscoe didn't buy one bit of it.
That doesn't surprise me.
He didn't buy a single chunk of it. And essentially somebody on Twitter called it, it must be Chiefs fan fiction night, which I thought was clever.
Yeah, very true.
So how much of that is true? How much of it is false? If any of it's true. If it's all true, it definitely is a very interesting way now that I think people will look at Eric Bieniemy.
I go in the middle.
To put that onus on the guy, and again, without having any actual tangible proof of any of that, that's just, I don't know. And some people, going to the coaching aspect, like why hasn't he gotten a head coaching job? A lot of people want to make it a race issue, and I understand
nothing to do with race.
Race is a hot topic in today's society. I understand that. The problem is there has been a substantial amount of black head coaches throughout the league over the past 20 years. There has. And they've come and they've gone. They've been successful. Some haven't been successful. Brian Flores, if you take a look at what he's done,
phenomenal
he's been
coach.
Successful in my opinion.
Yeah, phenomenal coach.
He's been very successful. Now, his whole lawsuit that he's taken out against the NFL, we'll remain to see if there's any actual proof of that. I fully believe that he would have gotten the Texans job had the lawsuit not come out. But then they turn around and hire Lovie Smith. So it's not like they're not hiring black coaches. And maybe Bieniemy, just because you don't hire somebody and now you're thinking everything in the terms of race, that doesn't mean that Eric Bieniemy didn't get hired. Because maybe, and especially if this story is true, that's what people don't want to hire him for, or some other thing. And I have no idea. I'm just laying out all the scenarios of what things look like when you're doing business. And if these stories are true, it is damning. I hope they're not.
Me too.
I hope they're not. I think Eric Bieniemy has been great for this team.
I
But
think that
again, we just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he's a big part of why you've been to 4 straight AFC championship games. Whether or not you've won them or not, he's been kind of the driving factor on why this team has been able to go so far in the playoffs. And another thing, the guys on this team love Eric Bieniemy. You saw Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill came out yesterday and is like, okay, I can't even believe that these guys are talking about Eric Bieniemy in a negative light. I mean, Travis Kelce practically lobbied for him on radio and TV, like, give this man a job. I can't even believe that he's not hired yet. And no one has come out and said that Eric Bieniemy is a problem. That's why this article kind of felt so damning or felt so shocking, because it's just, it wasn't a side that we really were accustomed to seeing or really knew anything about. Like, I had no idea that this was even a problem. But if this is true, which, I'm kind of leaning towards it's not, but I think pieces of it are true. That's what I'm trying to tell people. Don't believe everything you read, because a lot of it might be fake, but there are truths to some of those things. I do think that for a fact, because we can at least somewhat agree to one of those things happening. And if one of those things is true and 2 of those things are true, how much of it's not true? You know what I mean? Like, something has got to be true in that article.
And that's the bad part. When you take something that, again, like we do know that happened, and you take a kernel of truth and wrap it in a big ball of bullshit, then at that point you've muddied the water so much. At what point unless Eric Bieniemy came out or Andy Reid came out, which Andy Reid probably would never do it. That's just not how Andy operates. But unless he came out and specifically said, all of that is not true, I took full control. Eric either called the plays or I called the plays or whatever, again, which we probably won't get. Like, what this article has done is just muddied the waters. And again, I'm not taking credit away from the guys who wrote it if it's true. Because if so, that's
great journalism. It would be great journalism if that's true.
It would be great insider sources, again, unnamed. But it's caused a giant shitstorm between fans of Kansas City and I think how they view the Chiefs organization, how they view Eric Bieniemy, and maybe even how they view Andy Reid at this point.
But here's the problem. We're never going to find out if this is true. This will get swept under the rug. If Eric Bieniemy isn't back next year, we're never going to hear about it. No one's going to ask him about this in the press conference. I think this story, we're not going to find out if it's true or not. And maybe time will tell, but I just have this weird feeling that if he isn't back, which I think that there is a strong possibility that he probably comes back, we'll probably talk about that in a minute, but I think that he probably would never talk about this. I don't think anyone else would talk about this. So we will never know if this story is true or not. But I think that we can look at pieces of it and say, I think this is a pretty good estimate of what happened. Like this story here, there's one clip that, I haven't read yet, but it's pretty big. It was kind of the main piece of the article. So this happened I guess nobody can say exactly when this happened, but at one point during the AFC Championship game, the following exchange took place after Bieniemy called a play. Reid, no, run this. Bieniemy, what the bleep. Kafka, we're blowing this game. And then Mahomes says from the huddle, call the effing play or I will. I think if you had to pick a spot in which that play probably came into effect, I think it was probably at the end of the first half. But that just kind of shows you, because there was one play where they just looked confused and all right, what are we doing? And then Mahomes called an audible. So it's well, maybe that was true. And there was confusion. So, but I don't know really if this happens in every football game. Is there always confusion or always something that goes wrong or they have a disagreement on what the play call is? How much of this is just normal football or is this out of the ordinary? You know what I mean?
No, I will tell you this. That is not unordinary for there to be some confusion between, because there could have been a plan. Teams don't just waltz into games and start picking plays off the top of their head. They usually have rehearsed scenarios. And it sounds like if this is true, because I could see it happening on that play, it sounds like they were trying to do something specific. And honestly, running the ball would have probably been a better choice maybe, or Patrick just throwing the ball directly out of the end zone after a 2-second count
because you got 5 seconds. You don't have a long
Yeah.
time to hold on to the ball. So miscommunication happens, and especially when you have, and this is a scenario that you might have with Andy Reid trying to take over if Bieniemy was calling the plays, or Bieniemy thinking he had full control, and Andy's like, that's not how this works, I'm going to take over now. When you have something like that and you got two people bickering, at the end of the day, the quarterback's on the receiving end of that. It's in his headset. He's not sitting there talking to these guys. He's got play clock to manage, a play to run, people to get set up, a play to actually execute properly, especially all in a scenario. You got 24 seconds. I'm sorry, you got 40 seconds. This isn't basketball.
The shot clock.
So I can 100% see some miscommunication happening. That is not out of the ordinary.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it
especially
happens every
in a
game.
big-time AFC championship game.
For sure. Like, I don't think that was out of the ordinary, but it just kind of seems like if those circumstances of events happened on that last play in the first half, it's just like, damn, like they really just weren't on the same page. And I don't know if it was because Bieniemy just didn't call the right play and Mahomes is just like, oh, I got to call an audible. But one thing that we were mentioning about, they should have just ran the ball because that was kind of been the big topic of conversation. Jarrett McKinnon was averaging like 6.3 yards a clip, was it? Like, he was getting so many yards on the ground, and they decided to go with Clyde over Jarrett when they shouldn't have. And I think Bieniemy probably had a really big influence on that decision, and that's really frustrating because it just kind of shows you the favoritism that we've been talking about all year. And if Bieniemy's the one that's been behind this favoritism, Andy Reid's a guy that we can put up with because he's a Hall of Fame coach and he's great. Eric Bieniemy, I don't think he's established enough or he's as important. And if he's just the one that's making all these bad personnel decisions, not a good look. Not a good look at all.
Yeah, man, the whole scenario, again, like I said, the water has been so muddied. I mean, what is this? Flint, Michigan? Like, this is that's not even a bad day, man. It's not their fault, man. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. This is so convoluted at this point, and who knows, man. At the end of the day, I hope Brett Veach puts together a defense, and I hope Bieniemy, if things are okay, I hope he does come back, and I hope the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl again next year. It's just the whole thing has just been completely blown out of proportion based on pure speculation with unnamed sources.
Yeah, it's pure speculation, and I don't believe a lot of it, but I do believe some parts of it, and I could be wrong for that, but I think it's almost there's so much information there for some of it not to be true, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And especially because like it's not like he said that Eric Bieniemy sabotaged the game. I don't think anything like that was put into question, but I do think that he made some very questionable decisions, and I think that if they are true, they're quite damning. But Blake, we're almost out of time here, but really quickly, do you think that the Chiefs will bring back Bieniemy next year?
Yeah, I do. I don't see, unless he gets a phenomenal offer from somebody or out of nowhere. I just don't think. I don't see why you wouldn't bring him back unless, again, if he doesn't come back, all it does is add fuel to this specific fire.
Oh yeah.
Which again probably won't be addressed. Probably won't have any answers, but it will only fuel speculation further. But I hope he comes back. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years we've had Eric Bieniemy. I mean, the Chiefs are one of the top offenses in the league every year.
Oh yeah. But
there has to be some correlation.
Yeah, but also a lot of it has to do with Andy Reid and then Patrick Mahomes being the greatest player in the NFL, right?
I mean, does it? Is that it? Like, you take one of those 3 pieces out. Now, granted, Patrick's going to be Patrick, Andy's going to be Andy. But, again, with this story, how much now are we understanding that Bieniemy actually had control over the offense? How much didn't he?
That's true.
We'll find out as soon as he leaves.
We will.
If it gets better or worse.
And honestly, we'll talk about this in another video, but a lot of Chiefs fans are like, oh, the Chiefs should bring back Matt Nagy. And it pisses me off. I can't even believe that is something that people want. It's almost like they didn't watch the Bears offense the past couple years. But that's a topic for another. Oh, you want to talk about it really quickly?
Well, I will say, just a slight touch. Granted, okay. It's not necessarily Nagy's fault that the Bears were garbage talent-wise.
Yeah,
And
but they also
when
his play calling and his just offensive mind isn't exactly the sharpest.
I mean, he did pretty well in Kansas City. Again, he was with Andy Reid. That's the weird secret of these Chiefs offenses is how much is the offensive coordinators, how much is apparently Mike Kafka,
Yeah.
or how much of it is Andy Reid. Now, we know Andy Reid's an offensive-minded genius.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think almost if you got Andy Reid, it's easy because Andy Reid is the one that's designing the plays. All they got to do is call it. And
Exactly.
it's hard to call a bad play when Andy Reid doesn't really draw up bad plays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but Matt Nagy, having been in Kansas City's offense for as long as he was, it's not like he just throws away all of his playbooks. I mean, I have every single playbook from every single week of 2 different years of college. 2 different teams, 4 years of college football. They keep their playbooks. So it's not like he doesn't have those plays to call. Now, if he's calling them at improper times, that's one thing. But once he has a great play design, they're going to take that and keep that. It's not like copyright on plays. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if anything, he'd be bad situational play caller. But his offense would still have all the same tools from any offense he's been in previously, except not the same offensive weapons, which they didn't have.
That's true. This is something that we'll definitely dive into later on in the offseason because I think we're going to find out a lot really quickly about this whole Bieniemy thing because they brought Bieniemy in for an interview to discuss the future. We haven't heard anything about it, but right now he's no longer on the team because he signed a 1-year contract last year, and they haven't renewed it. So I think that we're going to find out pretty quickly whether we bring somebody else in or we bring back Bieniemy. We're going to find out in the next couple weeks whether we have Bieniemy back as OC or we go and find someone else. So, Blake, I appreciate you for coming on and talking about this conspiracy theory, dare I say. So where can people find you?
You can find me on the Twitter sphere at Wake, capital N Blake 29. It's Wake and Blake 29. I am talking pretty much anything and everything these days. It doesn't matter. I'll touch on just a little bit of everything.
That's what we need you for. We need to hear your opinion on literally everything because someone needs to say it. Someone needs to say it.
Don't worry. I have not been shy about speaking my opinion, and I know some people don't like that. Most people do like that. So.
You got to be authentic. I might be an idiot, but I say a lot of things that that's what I'm feeling. That's what it's got to come out of my mouth. And, Anyway, you guys can find me on Twitter. That is KC Sports Report. Instagram is KC_Sports Report. Obviously, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to have more content coming out very soon. And with that being said, guys, have a great rest of your day. Peace.